الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم إننا ما نتعلم التعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير والحث والتمسك على بكتاب الله وسنة رسول الله ابتغاء مرضات الله وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Lord Most High, the exalted, beneficent bestower of bounties and mercies, and we ask our Lord to send copious and eternal and unlimited blessings and salutations upon our beloved Prophet Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And we acknowledge the traditional owners of this land in which we teach and learn, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present. So if we continue inshallah with the last chapter of the Book of Assistance of Imam al-Haddad, as Imam al-Haddad basically sums up for us what's been in the previous chapters, and he gives us an insight and a concise sort of set of paragraphs into. Can everyone see a copy of the book? Make sure there's two people with a copy. Are there any spare copies between the sisters? Give it to the little bloke. Stand up, the little bloke. Jazakumullah khairan. So Imam al-Haddad's recounting from other traditions as well, to let us know that this isn't something new either. It's not something that just came from the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the essence of who a human being is, and the essence of travel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't change from the different prophets. The Sharia changes, but the essence of it in terms of the human nature doesn't change, because this is about perfecting one's human state and reaching the pinnacle and the epitome of being a human being. And that's since Allah created us, that's been the same. That hasn't really changed. It's become more intricate and detailed as the world kind of becomes more advanced and technologically open, you might say. But that's the reality of the human state. So he says, قال المؤلف رحمه الله رضي الله عنه وعنكم نفعنا به وبكم وأوحى الله إلى بعد أنبيائه عليهم السلام قل لقومك لا يدخلوا مداخل الأعداء ولا يلبسوا ملابس أعداء ولا يركبوا مراكب أعداء ولا يطعموا طعام أعداء فيكونوا أعدائي كما هم أعدائي. So in this English copy with the gentleman on the front, it's page 130, and in the new book, the different one. So that's the one with the gentleman, with the brother, Shaykh. And the other one, what page is it? The newer one? Show us the cover of that book. Whoops. That one's 130, yeah. Is it this one? On the front? No, it's a different one. What one's that one? So that new book, what page is it? 139. And it says, is it beginning, middle, end? Middle of 139. It says, God revealed to one of his prophets. Can you see it? Tamam? Yep, so God revealed to one of his prophets, upon all of whom be peace. Tell your people not to do as my enemies do, not to engage in what my enemies engage in, and do not eat of the food of my enemies, so they do not become my enemies just as the others are my enemies. So this is again the universal principle, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, لَا نُفَرِّقُ بَيْنَ أَحَدٍ مِّن رُسُلِي, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the Muslims that we don't differentiate between any of the prophets, because the prophets, they're the chosen people of Allah Azza wa Jal to deliver the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the servants of Allah, to all of the creation, the jinn and the ins in that sense, the humankind and the jinn kind, the spirit world. And so in terms of that, there's universal messages, as we said, that go across the board irrespective of which prophet was sent to which people, and that also includes the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So he says, say to your people, قُلْ لِقَوْمِكَ, tell your people not to do as my enemies do. So in that sense, the enemies are the outward open enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that at that time, like for example, in the time of the Prophet of Allah, or the Prophet Ibrahim more correctly, it was people like Nimrud, right? Nimrod and all his followers. In the time of Musa, it was Fir'aun and his followers. In the time of Nuh as well, the people that opposed Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, Noah, in other words. So those people that dressed a particular way, that acted a particular way, that ate a particular way, there had to be a differentiation between the believers and the non-believers. Not just in dress, not just in mannerisms, not just in eating, not just in the different outward aspects, but internally as well. And so, and what the remainder here says is that, so that they not become my enemies just as the others are my enemies. Because when believers associate and emulate, so to speak, the non-believers, or in this sense, the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And enemies doesn't mean non-believers. It could be the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. Whoever is outwardly out there trying to destroy, openly trying to destroy what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to happen on earth. So they're the people that we should disassociate ourselves with in every single fashion. And not just that a person who's a believer and a person who's one that follows the Prophet of that time and the Muslims in today's time, if they associate themselves with those who are outward enemies of Islam, outward enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, outward enemies of the tenets of the faith in terms of justice and in terms of peace and in terms of helping the disenfranchised and all the other tenets of our faith that are out there, making sure that people have the capacity to think freely and speak freely, and also that people have their property belongs to them and it can't be taken away from them unjustly, and the different aspects of our faith, the main tenets that our faith is based on. So if the believers associate themselves with those people, eventually they'll be affected and maybe even infected. Whether it's and the worst type of infection really is psychological. That's the worst type of infection and that's why I was mentioning previously about the sisters with the lips and all that. I know it's funny or whatever it is, but that means we've been infected by that's out there. We've been affected by the negative things, and that's only a little thing. It's not a big thing. But worse than that is to be infected in our thought process. Like some people saying about the miracles that happened to the Prophet. Oh, how can that be the case? Whoever believes, that the Prophet spoke to an animal and the Prophet did this and the Prophet did that, that's rubbish. Well, how come we've got like the horse whisperer and the dog whisperer and all these different whisperers out there, people that they're on TV with the guys that live with the bears for like 20 years. How come that's fine and that's okay, but we can't believe that the Prophet of Allah, a pigeon spoke to him or a deer spoke to him, that's us being infected psychologically by the people, by the people that are out there, the enemies of Allah, without mentioning anyone. But really the enemy of Allah is the shaitan and those who follow the shaitan. So the whole theory of evolution business. Because there's a theory of evolution, us Muslims were infected by it. Right? So always we have to kind of justify our own philosophy and our ideology about those things to what else is going on out there. Whereas we should be the opposite. We should be out there investigating, using the money that we have from petrodollars and whatever else our money comes from, to do research centres and universities and institutes to do the research. You can't just say, oh, that's in the Qur'an and it's all good. The Qur'an is in the Qur'an. But what about us? What are we doing to bring to life the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our own lives and into the lives of humanity? So we have to be out there. That's the responsibility of the believers as a collective, to be out there and making those investigations, putting two and two. That's why the Muslims actually reached the pinnacle of humankind and were the pinnacle of humankind for just about 1,000 years roughly, and because that's what the scholars did. The first universities, the first hospitals, all those things came from the Muslims. Clocks, mathematics, algebra, optics, all these different things, because they were putting into practice what was in the books. They were testing the theories. They were testing what was in the Qur'an. They were testing what was in the Hadith. And they didn't just stop there. They looked back to Aristotle. They looked back to Socrates. They looked back to the great philosophers of the time and looked at what their theories were and tried them, the theories. They tried the experiments to prove, is that right or is that not right? If it wasn't right, they didn't accept it. If it was right, they accepted it. How does the Western world know about these scholars, these philosophers? Through the Muslims who lived in Spain. That had been forgotten. It was gone. It was the Muslims that revived these things. So in our time, alhamdulillah, we've got individuals like Nobel Prize winners in science and different things. We've got individuals out there that are great. But as an ummah, as a collective, for the last 200 years we've been in a deep coma when a'udhu billah azza wa jal. And there's a lot of reasons that's been the case. So therefore the collective issue, we can't do much about that. But as individuals, we have to be contributing on that front somewhere, somehow, in whatever capacity, whatever skill set we have. And if we can't, at least with the intention. And if we can't, at least make dua for those that Allah, rather than say, oh, who's that person? They think they're good, they think they're intelligent, or they think they're smart, or they think they're rich, or they think they're whatever. Make dua for those people. Make dua for those people. So in terms of the condition of those people that clearly go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the believers, if they associate with those enemies, they become like them eventually. That's what and not only that, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the la'na, his curse, the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on those people that are oppressors, on those people that are his enemies. So if we associate with those individuals, and we dress like those individuals, and we eat like those individuals, then we're also, putting ourselves in a dangerous or a precarious situation where if Allah does send some sort of a punishment, we'll be amongst those people. And then if we're amongst those people when we die, whoever's with a people or has a connection to a people, they'll be resurrected with those people on the Day of Judgment. So if we look at a particular way, and we act a particular way, we speak, have a particular vernacular that associates us with the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's a risk that will be in that. So we have to differentiate ourselves, and that's part of the sunnah. Even Ashura that we had a couple of days ago, we know the story. The Prophet ﷺ, when he came to Medina, he saw the Jews fasting Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, and he said, why is he doing that? They said, because it's the day that Allah emancipated Moses from Egypt and his people. And he said, Ana awla bikum min Musa, that I've got priority over you than Musa because I'm following him properly. And then he fasted the next year. Well, he didn't. He told everyone to fast. He wasn't around, alayhi salatu wasalam. But he said, fast 9 and 10. Why? Don't do like they do. Don't do exactly like they do. Men, why do we trim our moustaches off our lips? What's that? Well, if you got one, yeah. So if you have a moustache, you have to trim it off your lip.
Differentiate yourself from the Jews.
Right, exactly. Differentiation from the other people. And it's not that we're not saying they're the enemies of Allah. We're not saying that. We're saying there always has to be that differentiation. That differentiation from whatever, because the believers are one. They're a body. They're one unit. And so that differentiation is beneficial for us. No.
Why not we say the enemies of Allah if they're involved in open shirk?
Well, the enemies of Allah are the ones who work to destroy the believers, really. So if they're doing their own thing, right, and for us, so if they're doing their own thing and they're doing whatever they're doing, it's our responsibility to give them da'wah. It's our responsibility to call them to righteousness. It's our responsibility if they don't know, if they're in jahl. But the enemies of Allah are really the ones who know and directly go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, the ones that change the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowingly. These different things, the murder of the prophets, the murder of the righteous people, that make women take off, like what's happening for example, in China, for the Uyghurs in Western China. Those types of things where it's openly they're going against, then that's a different story, and that's a different situation. So that's really where it comes into. Our avowed enemy is the shaitan. There's no doubt about that. And then look, we have all these things with, dress, and it's part of it. We can't, no matter how much we want to blend in, which is good, so we should, like wearing all black, for example, and all men wearing white, this dress. All right, it is a bit difficult for people in this country to find it, but at the same time, we have to have our own dress. We have to have a dress that's, because you look at the Muslims, like this is the Yemenis, what Yemeni scholars wear. Then you look at the Indonesians, what they wear. Then you look at the Pakistanis, what they wear. Then you look at the Africans, what they wear. And you look at the Indian, every group of Muslims in their particular area, their dress is different. And there's no reason why as Australians, we can't have an Australian style Islamic dress. There's no reason why we can't. And we actually should. A dress that differentiates us and protects our awrah, like first, that's the first requirement. And the second requirement that it's useful in terms of the environment in which we live in. It's not an affront to people, and people find it easy for us to talk to us and associate with us and deal with us. That's part of our deen. That's part of our deen, and we need to develop those things. We need to have, for example, if you work in a professional setting, you have something that is professional for that setting in terms of where you are, and has a bit of an Islamic tinge to it so that you know who you are, and others know who you are. Because one of the brothers, mashallah, back in the day, he was a bit off track, And he was one of these guys, big, tall guy, he's an attractive bloke, knows how to talk, whatever, whatever. So he was always getting in trouble with women. So when he made proper tawbah and repented to Allah, he used to always wear the turban and he used to always wear the gown. And the brothers would say to him, "What do you wear it for?" He said, "No, he doesn't want to tell anyone what his story is. He doesn't want to tell anyone." And then he was telling me one day, years later, he was telling me one day he only had a few, he wasn't that wealthy either. He only had a few, so one day he had to wear his normal shorts and his t-shirt and he went out, he had to go out and run an errand. And he says straight away he fell into trouble. Straight away he fell into trouble with the opposite gender. And so he went back to wearing it. And then people say, "Oh, only sheikhs wear that, you're not a sheikh." But if he didn't do that, it was going to fall apart. So our dress is a uniform for us. Well, it protects us. It keeps us away from the things that can lead us to destruction in terms of our progression to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is an imperative for us. Have you ever been to Indonesia? Have you seen the ladies, how they dress there? They've got floral and bright colours in there. And everyone's wearing that, so it's okay. Like, all right, if you went to Saudi or Iran and wore that, it wouldn't work. It may work here, I don't know, but that's for the sisters to work that out and for them to dress in a way that, and for the brothers as well. When you go there, they wear the short because it's humid. Like actually, this dress isn't actually the best for these conditions because this is good for Arab dry conditions because there's heaps of clothes. In humid conditions like Australia, you want the least amount of clothes. You want something that's, that doesn't, because the humidity makes you sweat a lot and it's not the best. So that's what we need to develop. We need to develop the clothes that are beneficial and useful and that differentiate us as Muslims and then allow us, inshallah, to propagate our faith, bi'idhnillah. All right, so any questions about any of that? No.
I just wanted to say, most of the countries you mentioned are mostly like Muslim majority countries, but like when it comes to Australia, it's much harder to like widely manufacture Muslim clothing, especially since most of our products come from America and Europe. It's not really ideal, or you would have to get out of your way to look for them. And if we're looking for like a Muslim community that's easy for everyone, how would we how do you manufacture a product in for example a Christian majority country for a different religion?
So the question, so the question is with mass production that certain clothes, they're made for trends and fashion or whatever the case might be. How do we do that? Start yourself. It's not hard to get things made and get things tailored. There's plenty of people around that can do those sorts of things. Come up with your own designs, or if someone you know is a designer, ask them. Even if they're not Muslim, ask them to design it for you. Something that's suitable for the conditions and the circumstances in which you live. So it might be like a hybrid of maybe the Indonesian with something different, because the Indonesians wear their what do they call that? The sarong. They wear the sarong. So like what I thought was like a pair of 3/4 pants, like those cargo pants, with the Indonesian top, and then maybe the shorter sleeves for the brothers. That's something that is suitable for Australia, especially the summer. It's not good in winter, of course, but it's suitable for the summer. And then it's not too much of it's not too different from what other people wear in that sense, but it still differentiates us as Muslims. So it's up to us to be creative. If we want Allah, we have to strive. We have to live outside the box. We have to live outside the square. If we live inside the square, we're just going to go along with whatever everyone else is doing. And unfortunately, that's not going to get us to Allah, following everyone. If we lived in a righteous society, maybe. If we lived in Tarim or Makkah or Medina, maybe. But not in this country. And unfortunately, misfortunately, sometimes not only do you have to swim against the rip, across the rip, you have to swim against the rip. In other words, upstream. But that's where the reward is. When you're the only one doing something, you get the reward of everybody else that should be doing it. It's a big thing. And the inayah of Allah, the nadhra of Allah is on that individual. Because Allah wants those people to be better. And then if you're encouraging your friends to do it, you make those, whatever, the dress, and you give it to someone, or you encourage someone, you encourage them by wearing that particular dress, then it makes a difference, inshallah. But our job is not to change everyone. Our job is to change ourselves, inshallah. And then the rest is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that help? You can do heaps of things online these days as well. If you want to design things, it's cheap. Everything comes from China. You have to do a couple of numbers, get a few friends together, The brothers are doing it. Some of those brothers, they wear that hoodie with the long, I don't know where they got it. They got it. Maybe the brothers in New York, when we met the brothers in Hajj, I think it was, they had these T-shirts that came down like almost down to the knee. It's a normal T-shirt, but it's long, like it's a sunnah. That's awesome.
It's a trend now in some shops.
Yeah? It's trendy now? Alhamdulillah, it's trendy. Alhamdulillah, it's trendy. Okay, so he says, وَأَوْحَى اللَّهُ إِلَى دَاوُدَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ كُنْ بِي مُسْتَأْنِسًا وَمِنْ سَوَايَ مُتَوَحِّشًا. He says, and God revealed to Dawood alayhi salam, find intimacy with me and be estranged from all else. So that's going back to the point about last week. Where's our comfort? Where's our comfort zone? Right? We come back, we've been at work, we're stressed out, how to fight with mum, how to fight with dad, how to fight with brother, how to fight with the sister, upset about something. Where do we find that solace? Intimacy is the word in Arabic as it's translated directly across. But the meaning is solace. Where's our zone? Right? Where's that area where the chill zone, chill out zone, whatever you want to call it? Where is that? What do we do to really get back to what do I do to get back to who I am as a person? Do I jog? Do I lift weights? Do I read? Do I sew? Do I crochet? Do I play basketball? Do I read books? Do I read Qur'an? Do I fast? Do I pray? Do I make dhikr? Do I make extra salat? Do I make wudu? What is it that I do? And what I do determines really who I am. Outside of the bright lights of the world and the leering eyes of other people, me. Where is that solace? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Dawood alayhi salam, find that solace, find that intimacy with me. And then al-wahsha is wilderness. That's the wilderness. The wilderness is everything, everyone and everything else. Because he's Rabbul Alameen. What's the Alameen? Kul ma siwa Allah. Right? Alameen is everything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything that's created except Allah is Alameen. So he's the world of everything that's other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So all those other things, we shouldn't be looking for the solace in that. Oh, had a bad day, ring up my friend, whinge for an hour, blah, blah. We'll meet someone for chai latte, isn't it? Caramel chai latte, was it? Right? We'll catch up for the caramel chai latte, and then whinge, complain. The research now is that the more we whinge and the more we complain, the more the chemicals in our brain change, and the more the electric waves in our brain change, it actually makes us depressed, mind you. That's the research coming out now. So if you want to whinge and you want to complain, where are you finding the solace? If something happens to me and I can't relax till I tell so-and-so about it, I've got problems. I've got serious problems. Because that means I'm not returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas if I'm the person, what happened to the Prophet ﷺ? إِذَا حَزَبَهُ أَمْرًا فَزَعَ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Right? If anything upsets him, if anything makes him perturbed, alayhi salatu wasalam, what does he do? He goes to prayer. وَجْوَلَتْ قُرَّةَ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. The coolness of my eyes. In other words, what makes me relax? Where my chill zone is salat, alayhi salatu wasalam. So in reality, who are we seeking the help or the refuge of? What are we seeking the help? Some people need to have a ciggy. They get stressed out, straight away they spark up a cigarette. Because that's the only way they can calm down. Unfortunately, misfortunately, it's not helping them in their sayd and their travel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? He said, يا داود كل الصادقين من عبادي بي فليفرحوا وبذكري فليتنعموا. O David, tell the true saints among my servants to rejoice in me and delight in my remembrance. So that's the real Siddiqeen. The saints, yeah, but the Siddiqeen is like Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Allahumma arda anhu. That whatever they believe, they do. They don't have any. They're not perturbed by their own thoughts. Because what happens to us sometimes is We know we want to do something, but we're worried about what everyone else is going to say. In terms of the deen and in terms of being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's people that I've spoken to and met, they want to go forward, they want to follow the deen, but they're worried about what other people are going to say about them, and that's why they don't want to do it. They know that if they pray in the masjid, they're going to leave that life of dalal, that life of being lost, that life of being anxious, but they're attached to it. They're attached to that world. And to that, really what they're attached to is that person that they are when they're in that condition. Because to move forward is to leave behind who I was. And that's scary for a lot of people. That's what scares them. Oh, what? I'm not going to be that person that I was? Ooh, comfort zone. Exactly. And comfort zone means me, my personality. Oh, I was happy with what's wrong with me? Why should I change? There's nothing wrong. I'm fine. Because they don't have the strength when it's a weakness. It's not a strength. It's a big weakness. So he says, tell those people that we should be happy. فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. The rejoice, that's a good word. Rejoice in me. And a person can only do that if the feelings they have in life are connected to the next world. Otherwise, how are they going to rejoice in Allah? They're like, man, Allah's on my back all the time. Don't swear, don't lie, don't talk about other people. What a drag. This is bringing me down, killing my birds. Right? Isn't that what they're saying? It's no good. I don't like it. But the person who's connected to what's beyond the veil, in the unseen, of course they're going to be happy with Allah. And this is how many times, this is the classic one. Shaykh, I've got no one but Allah. What else do you want? What are you calling me for then? You're ringing me up and you're telling me that you got no one but Allah. Hey man, I wish I was in your situation. You're ringing me, you want help from me. You got no one but Allah. Whoa. Yeah, that's when they become their most destitute. Not realizing that that's actually when they're the most successful. That's when they're the most complete. That's when they're at their strongest. Because why? The attachment has been to, the rejoicing has been in all else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now that their friends have left them and their families left them and now they're on shaky ground because they've never been there before. But they're not realizing that it's actually an open communication between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nearly every time I answer the phone, actually, that's what I'm hearing. Oh, I'm like, wow, cool, man. I wish I was in your situation. And that's the rejoicing. And, he says, and delight in my remembrance. Yeah, because why would a person be delighted in the remembrance of Allah? What happens when we remember Allah?
Allah remembers you.
MashaAllah alaik. What else would you want to be happier with? He says, يا داود حبب إلي عبادي قال يا ربي وكيف أحببك إلى عبادك قال ذكرهم آلائي يا داود. That's it. ذكرهم آلائي. He says, O David, cause my servants to love me. And David asked, O Lord, how can I cause them to love you? And he subhanahu wa ta'ala replied, remind them of my favors. So that's our job. Right? Isn't that Dawood, he's a prophet, and we're the followers of the last prophet. There's no more prophets after him, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. So we carry on that job. So our job is to remind people of his favors. That's our job. Why? Because it brings people into a happy state. A state of rejoicing. A state of contentment. A state of gratitude. Rather than like, normally what you hear is you're going to die, you're going to go to the hellfire. You're going to die, you're going to go to the hellfire. Allah's going to destroy you. Leave me alone. Stop busting my chops. Tell me something positive. And particularly in the world and the time in which we live in now, it's what the world's about. Positivity, being positive, which is good. So we need to be positive about our deen. We need to be positive about what Allah wants from us in terms of our connection with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala and in terms of the connection of others to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Should we stop? So is that a no or a yes? So we've finished the whole thing. It's very long. He says, يا داود من رد إلي هاربا كتبته جهبذا. O David, the one who returns a runaway to me, I declare an arduous worker for my sake. So, hariban is someone who's running away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's a fugitive. So someone who's a fugitive from Allah, the one who calls that person back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, jahbadan arif. In other words, gnosis. That person gets the knowledge of Allah. That's why da'wah, calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is such a high status. Because firstly, it's the job of the anbiya. Firstly, the rusul, the messengers, and then the anbiya, the prophets. And we take that from the Prophet of Allah because there's no more prophets after him alayhi salatu wasalam. So someone and that particularly means the believer. And there's a hadith that says to return a Muslim back to Allah is better than to bring 100 non-Muslims to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the sanad of the hadith isn't the best, but the meaning behind it is that person's already connected to Allah. Right? It's the stock in trade. So in other words, you've got a business and you want to sell what you've got. That's more important than getting more stock in, because you've got it there. It's there. So that person's close to Allah. And if whoever does that, Allah considers them عارف, one who has gnosis of him. يا داود إذا رأيت لي طالبا فكن له خادما. O David, when you see a person or a man who seeks me, then be a servant to him. Right? The one who wants Allah, who's on that path to Allah, serve, help that person, assist that person. Because it's beneficial for you too. If you help someone, give someone $1, give him a good word, pick him up, drop him off, whatever the case might be, you get the same reward as that person. And if that person gets elevated, you get elevated. He says, يا داود لا تسأل عني عالما قد أسكرته الدنيا فيضلك عن سبيل أولئك قطاع الطريق على عبادي. Well, I think we'll just stop on this one because it's getting a bit heavy. O David, do not inquire about me from a scholar whom the world has intoxicated, for he will bar you from my path. Such are to my servants like highwaymen. Right? So it's again having yaqadha, being awake, being conscious of what's around us, and not taking just with the madahir, just with the outward appearances. Because outward appearances are generally deceptive. Not always, but generally there's a deception there. Because people, the way they look outwardly, like do we ever leave the home and our hair's all over the place and our beard's like going one hair there, one there, our clothes not matching? Do we ever do that? No. Never. Never do that. Right? Very rarely, unless there's an emergency situation, you have to leave in your Ugg boots and your PJs and your nightgown and whatever. If it's not an emergency though, put our best foot forward. 3 hours later, we leave the house. Make sure everything's 100% perfect. What if we see him? That one. Got to put out. So, what do you think everyone else is doing? You think you're the only one doing that? Everyone else is practicing polishing their act. Yeah, it's pretty much what it is. Everyone's polishing their act. They're getting it, they're fixing it, putting a bit of, Karuba wax on it and getting it shiny as possible and matching everything so it all looks good and make sure the brand is visible on the outside so you know that they got money and they're not a tight person and a miser. So that being the case, you know yourself and you know what your outside reflects with regards to your internal state. In other words, your patent to your latent. So why would you trust others then just because of their external state, irrespective of who they are? Irrespective of who they are. Doesn't matter who they are. And in this sense, he's talking about the scholars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the scholars. He says to Dawood alayhi salatu, do not inquire about me from a scholar whom the world has intoxicated. What, you think scholars don't do the same thing? Think they don't wrap their imamah perfectly, right? Make sure they have the widest clothes. Make sure all the clothes match. And the beard, the hair dryer. I've seen the dudes do it. Hair dryer on their beard and just cut it so it's exactly perfect, right? And particular type of perfume to go to a particular type of place, and that has to match that clothes, and the socks have to match that thing, and the shoes have to be white if they're wearing white, and that's why. Would you not expect that to be the case? Would you expect them to be? If you went to see a scholar and he was dishevelled, and he smelt bad, would you be inclined to take that person's counsel? I've heard some people say, "Oh, I don't want to take advice from a scholar who's fat." I'm like, why? Not one person, many people, because don't trust fat people. And the statistics are out there, actually. The statistics are out there. If you're tall, you got 30% chance, 6 foot and above, or considered to be tall, you got a 30% higher chance of succeeding than others. So you're already 30% more likely to succeed if you're tall. And if you're a male, another 30%. They're the stats. Right? I don't do them, I just read them. Okay? So, is that what it's going to be? That anyone you see who looks like they're pious, or even some cultures, the heaps of times, heaps of lebers, they ring me up and they're like, so-and-so said this. I'm like, no, actually, that's not part of the deen. But that person who told me is a hajj. Yeah, so what if they're a hajj? It's fard on everyone to go to hajj. It's a rukun of the deen. Now, they think because someone went to hajj, then they know like something more of the, like, what are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. It's not realistic. And so he's saying that, are there not worldly scholars? Are there not scholars out there, right, who have the degree and they dress the way they dress to make money? Well, if you're in particular countries, if you're a scholar and you have a masjid, you get a stipend. Every month you get a certain amount of money. And then when you go to the government agencies, you don't have to pay for the dealings that you have with any government agency. And some people get drivers, and some people get this, and some people get that. So you don't think that's a lucrative thing? Or even within the scholars, if you become a judge, if you become a mufti, if you become whatever, there's more money in it. Well, what do you think it is? And it's more status in it. And so when we talked about dunya previously, what did we say is the biggest dunya? Right? Which we said was, the current word that we use today, entitlement. Yeah, entitlement. So status and entitlement is the biggest form of dunya. So if you see the scholar, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whom the world has intoxicated, in Arabic it's a little bit different. He says, askartahu. Askaratu, jazakallah khair. Qad askaratu ad-dunya, barakallahu fikum. Qad askaratu ad-dunya, that the person has been intoxicated by the world, then that person, how are they going to guide you? They might know all the hadith in the whole world. They might be Amir al-Mu'mineen al-Hadith, which means they know 1,000 or 1,000,000 hadith, or a hadith. They might have memorized the whole Qur'an. But if that person isn't connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they in their own personal life, they're not making progression on the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as shown by the Prophet Muhammad alayhi sallam, how are they going to show you? How are they going to guide you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's impossible. And no one's perfect. No one's perfect. It's impossible for anyone to be perfect except the Prophet of Allah alayhi sallam. So does that mean that if you find out something about a scholar that they're whatever, I don't know, he's bought a house on interest, does that mean you should stop seeking knowledge from that person? It's up to you. You've got to make that decision, right? You've got to make the decision. If the person smokes a cigarette, for example, let's say the person's a chain smoker, you don't know. You see that person smoking, would you stop seeking knowledge from that person? Or you saw him coming out of a liquor shop. Maybe they didn't have anything in their hands, or maybe they did, but it's in a bag, you don't know what it is. You stop seeking knowledge from that person. They're talking to someone of the opposite gender. Generally, most of the mashaykh are men. So you see him talking to a woman somewhere, dressed in an inappropriate way. Do you stop? You've got to make that decision. That's a decision for you to make as to who you take your knowledge from. It's a decision for you to make as to who helps you progress to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, you've got to give the individual the benefit of the doubt by asking them. If you see them coming out of the liquor land or whatever the thing is, the bottle shop, ask them. Maybe they needed money change. Who knows what the deal was? They needed to pull money out of the bank. The ATM wasn't working. That was the only place open at night. They went, used their card, whatever. They got a bottle. It was water. The guy put it in a bag anyway. You don't know. You don't know. So you've got to make those inquiries. You can't go off gossiping and talking when al-Bilad becomes either riba or namima, depending. If it's riba, if it's true, it's namima if it's untrue. Tail bearing. Right? So you've got to make that. You can't just walk through life in the din as a zombie and say, oh yeah, that's it. That person, Shaykh so-and-so is so. You've got to make those investigations. You've got to make sure that what you're hearing about so-and-so is from a reliable source as well. Some people just hate other people. Some people, they don't care, they just want to bring other people down because they've got issues themselves. And so they start rumors about that person. And those rumors are generally unfounded. So you've got to make those decisions, you've got to make those inquiries. Like if you go to a doctor, you find out who the doctor is, unless it's just a normal GP generally. You know, you find out who that person is. You find out, or if you're looking for a spouse and you find someone that you're attracted to, find out who they are, what they do, who their family is, what their background is. And it's more important in terms of who you take the knowledge from. So he says that a person who's intoxicated with the world, there will be a block. He says here, فَيَدِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ. He says that person, dalala is they will make you lost. So it's not that it's a bar specifically. It's the person won't be able to give you the appropriate advice that you need, and then you'll be lost. You'll be, wait a minute, that sheikh said do that, and I'm doing that, but it's not getting me to Allah. So what's going to happen to my deen in that state? Right? Of course it's going to disappear because I'm lost. I've been doing this for that many years. Actually, a brother came to me the other time. He's like, I've been following this sheikh for that many years and this and that, nothing's happening. I'm like, well, obviously there's a problem with either you or the sheikh, or both of you. If you've been doing that for that many years and you're not getting any benefit and your life's not changing and your progression to Allah isn't changing, you're not getting closer to Allah, you're not increasing in good deeds, your focus and your concentration, your devotion and your deeds isn't increasing, then there's a problem. Then there's a problem. If you were at a job and you stayed at that job for 5, 7, 10 years and you never got promoted, and you never got a pay increase, what's going to happen? And you see other people around you getting promoted, getting increases in pay. You're not going to put up with it. No one's going to put up with it. But in our deen, we put up with it. Oh yeah, because it becomes what? Comfort zone. Even in our deen. If that's not working, find someone else. Look, search. Get out of the comfort zone. Try something else. Try something new. At least cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the middle of the night. Say, Allah, I'm not going anywhere. What's the solution? And persevere. Such are to my servants like highwaymen. He says, أُولَٰئِكَ قِطَّاعُ الطَّرِيقِ عَلَى عِبَادِي. It's actually those so-called scholars, قِطَّاعُ الطَّرِيقِ, gangsters. Right, gangsters, the highwaymen, bushrangers in Australia. So they don't let people go from place to place except by robbing them. And so these people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to Sayyidina Dawood, they rob people of their deen. They rob people of their deen. And what did the Prophet say? أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عُلَمَاءَ السُّوءِ. The thing I most fear of all things that I fear, the most that I fear for you, is for the evil scholars. That's in this time. You don't know what they're up to. How many stories I've heard, like subhanAllah, this sister told me the other day. Crazy. She was married to this guy. Seriously crazy stuff. Married to this guy. Like, when I tell you, you're going to flip out. Yeah, it makes the story a bit more interesting. The suspense, right? So she's married to this guy. His family's close to this particular sheikh. He cheats on her, right? And he's on drugs. He's addicted to drugs. The lady he cheats with is addicted to drugs. They have a kid that is sick because of all the drugs. So the so-called sheikh comes to her. She's a revert, mind you. She's a revert, right? Comes to her and says, you got to forgive him and you got to look after their child as if it's your own child if you want to get to Allah. What the? Are you serious? Like, this is a true story. No, this is not made up. This is not made up. Because why? Because that family, and particularly the father, the husband's father, has some connection from that sheikh, and Allahu Alam what's going on there. And then when she told me, I was like, are you serious? She's like, and that's years gone by. Alhamdulillah, she was smart enough to say, no, I'm not doing that. It's not my problem. If that's a child they've had in zina, that's their issue. That's their issue. So these are the things this is like one of the many things that are out there. Don't be gullible. Kun yaqdana. Be conscious. Let your mind think. Let your heart feel. Don't doubt yourself. Ask Allah to guide you. And don't fall into the trap of being lost and losing the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after you've been striving to get on that way. And particularly if there's a bit of dhawq, a bit of taste for the unseen, then bi'idhnillah you're on the right path. And then ask Allah, take your time with it. Don't rush into it. Someone says that to you, oh, no worries. Pray, meditate, tafakkur, think about it. And that's from the things that are going on out there when another brother came, he's like, this is years and years and years ago when houses were like a couple of $100,000. He's all, my mother died, she had a house, she left me a house, and the house next door was mine already. And when she died, I knocked them all down and put 8 townhouses on them. I borrowed from the bank. He went to some sheikh, he said, no, it's haram, give me all the money. And this is like, I'm telling you, I'm not joking, it was nearly $1 million. I'll clean it up for you. I didn't say anything to the guy because then he'll go shoot that sheikh. Guaranteed. I'm like, maybe it was halal, maybe it was haram. You should go back to that guy because you can't get involved. This is when a house was worth 200 grand. It was nearly 900, nearly $1 million. So he could have bought 5 houses outright. And that sheikh took the money, right? And Allahu Alam what he did with the money. He's a simpleton. Right? And he trusted that person. But does that make sense to you? Does that make sense to you? Of the many different things out there, that the ones, the so-called sheikhs that remove sihr, and when they sexually abuse people. They're out there. Like not 1 and 2 and 10 and 20. And even some of them have been caught by the police and charged for sexually assaulting people. And men sexually assaulting women. And Christians. And it's all across all cultures. It's no different. Doctors do it to their patients. Didn't you see that doctor that he was a fertility guy? He's a fertility guy. So he was replacing everyone's sperm with his own sperm. So we're not just saying the Muslims are doing these things. Everyone, it's across the board. But for us, because we trust those people, the scholars, okay, that we trust them, yes, but in every situation, we've got to be awake to it. If they're telling you something that's outside the deen, if they're telling you something that's suspect in terms of, what your mind's telling you and what your heart's telling you, you need to be careful. You don't need to tell him you're a scholar of the devil when I'll be there. You say, I'll have a think about it. I'll get back to you. If you go to a doctor and the doctor tells you something you don't like what the doctor says, what do? You get a second opinion, right? You go to a second or a third, or do that. Yeah, but this sounds dangerous.
From my knowledge, I only 100% confirm something that hasn't been altered is the Qur'an, right? So that's something we can take from, but the Qur'an isn't really clean. So, you need context and sheikhs or scholars to explain it to you. And like what you said, a lot of sheikhs play games and things like that.
I didn't say a lot. I said there are sheikhs out there. I didn't say a lot. So that happens.
What's your second source if you don't understand the Qur'an?
So the tafsir of Qur'an is there. So there's hundreds and thousands of different tafsir. And even in English now, there's a good website, al-tafsir, altafsir.com. It's got about 7 or 10 different tafsir in English. altafsir.com. Al-Tafsir. It's from the university in Jordan. It's a very, very good website. It's got thousands, hundreds, maybe not thousands, but hundreds in Arabic and probably 10 or 15 in English. You can find the verse and read it. But it's not about tafsir al-Qur'an. It's about our progression to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's that key. And really what that needs, like you've got your family doctor, like you've got the local shop you always go to and get whatever you get, right? You need that in your life as well. A sheikh who's going to guide you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows you, who knows your situation, knows your temperament, knows your financial situation, knows you and your family and your father and your mother and your extended family, so that you can get advice from that person that's necessary for you on the path. It's not, dial a sheikh or Google a sheikh and whatever that person says you go and do. That's not the way to get a benefit. That's not the way to benefit from the scholars. And nor am I saying all the scholars are evil. I'm not saying that at all. It's not the case. There are some fantastic scholars out there that have left multi-million-dollar paying jobs to help people. Right? There's many of them, not one or two. There's many of them, and there's many sincere people out there that they don't care what anyone says. They know what's right. They know what Allah wants. They know what the Prophet ﷺ has taught, and they live that lifestyle. And they tell others to live that lifestyle. One time one of the mashaykh gave me this letter to read, right? And I'm like, Sheikh, is this you? And I'm like, can I have a look at your license? His license is different. His passports, his names are different. He's got like 12 different names. No, I'm not lying. This is all true. Are you going to trust someone with 12 different names? Right? But at the same time, if you know what you're on about, you can pick what you need to pick from that individual. And that comes with experience. That comes with you seeking your own knowledge. So if any sheikh, anyone tells you something that's not 100%, inquire. Find out, what do you mean? What's this about? What's that about? Ask the questions. You're entitled to ask those questions with respect, of course. Right? So you're entitled to ask those questions with respect. Otherwise, it's difficult. It's difficult to walk. If you're going to become physically strong, you don't have a coach or what I call PT, personal trainer, it's not going to happen. If you want to succeed in business, if you don't have a mentor or a group of people, a club, what do they have them like the what do they call those things? The chambers of commerce and things like that. If you're not associated, it's only going to be limited. Even if you've got a business in social media, if you don't have a certain amount of contacts, it's going to be limited. And same with the progression to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't have people around you that know Allah and have traversed that path previously and are on that path, it's going to be harder. So we want to use those people, like they say, don't reinvent the wheel. In our deen, we don't want to reinvent the wheel either. And if those people start telling us things that we're doubtful about, it doesn't mean we've got to just leave them altogether. Just that doubtful thing, leave it. They're human beings as well. They make mistakes. And people, they think that the sheikhs are like not... the other day I had a client who knows me as a sheikh, and then he comes in and he says, this guy's a disaster. And then when I have to stand my ground, right, because I'm giving him legal advice. So I'm giving him legal advice. He doesn't want me to say that. Why are you making it hard? I said, that's just how it is. But you're not like that outside of your life. I said, yeah, I'm not your mate here. I'm a solicitor. I'm telling you what the law is. I'm telling you what difficulties you're going to encounter on the path. Because if I don't tell you, later on you're going to come and say, you didn't tell me that. No, but you're a difficult person. I said, yeah, I am a difficult person. I'm a solicitor, champ. That's what solicitors do. So now the guy's got a bad impression of me because he had this kind of like, holier than thou impression of me. I'm not that. I'm a person. I'm full of mistakes. If you knew what I did when no one was around, you'd probably say, this guy's the lowest of the low. Scum of the earth when a'udhu billahi azza wa jal. No one knows what is in another person's heart. And you look at the qasaid of Imam al-Haddad, the poems, what he talks about himself. That my nafs, all it wants is status. All it wants is money. Imam al-Haddad saying that about himself. So if someone like me can't say that about himself, well, Sayyidina Umar was rolling around in the dirt. He said, if Allah, when he got stabbed, mind you, he said, if Allah doesn't forgive me, I'm finished. And we're going to say we're on a different... No, we're all human beings and we're all in it together. And the scholars carry a greater burden. Who are the first people to be taken to hellfire? On their faces. The scholars, the Qur'an, the people who recite the Qur'an, and the people who spend fi sabilillah. They're amongst the first people to go to the hellfire. if they're not sincere, they didn't do it for Allah. So it's not like, as much as there is, alhamdulillah, fadl min Allah, there's a responsibility that goes along with it. So we shouldn't be naive. They're human beings, the people you're dealing with. Does that mean we shouldn't respect them? No, we should respect them because they're the inheritors of prophethood. But what they do with it and how they live their life in accordance with it is relevant to each individual circumstance and situation where we meet these people. So we can be yaqzanan, we can be awake. Tamam? And it's an important topic, so if you've got questions or doubts, don't let them fester in your mind or in your heart. Ask now so those doubts can be removed, inshallah. If you have any questions or you need further clarification, ask now. So later on, you don't go and say, oh, Shaykh Haisam told me don't trust anyone. Fadl.
Everything we learn in this book, are we allowed to teach it, or like as in teach it or tell someone about it, or do we need like ijazah or something like that?
It's good to have the ijazah, but if whatever you learn and you implement in your life, the first part is to learn it. Before you start telling other people about it, you need to implement it into your life. It's not a shart, it's not a prerequisite of telling others, but the point of learning isn't just to tell others. The point of learning is to embody it. Once you embody it, once you emulate, fattabi'uni, once you emulate the Prophet of Allah, that'll become your natural state. It'll become your state, your condition, your being, your light, your color, not skin color, but the color of your soul, the color of your existence will exude, and people will feel that anyway. Like when you're young, you want to tell everyone everything, and that's just the nature of being young, with enthusiasm, and it's good to do that. But you've got to pick you've got to pick what you say, when you say it, and how you say it. And definitely, if you see someone who wants to be benefited, or you're having a discussion, certainly you should be saying whether you implement it in your life or you don't implement it. But learning just for the intention to tell people about it is a deficient way to learn. I learn so I can get close to Allah. Then if Allah allows me to propagate that, then it's a bonus for me. Tamam? And ijazahs are good, inshallah. Inshallah, when we finish, we'll ask Habib Kadhim to give us an ijazah. Then it's just the madad. The ijazah is like permission, but it's got spiritual support because there's a direct chain back to Imam al-Haddad, and that if it connects to us, it makes it easier for us to implement, and it makes it easier for us to propagate.
So what's compulsory with ijazah? What studies are compulsory that you need ijazahs definitely?
So the ijazahs are specific to their own thing. So some of the scholars, some of the Habib, for example, they give ijazah. They say, I give you ijazah in everything that I've learned. That's just barakah. That's just a barakah. But the real ijazah is when you learn the book and you go through each word and you say it back to the sheikh will give you an ijazah in it, which ijazah means you've got a license to use it, And really what it is, unless it's a license to teach it, it's a license for you to use it. And it's just like I said, because this book was written by a man, by a sheikh, and he taught a student who taught a student who taught a student, and for us from Habib Umar and Habib Kadhim, they're directly connected in that chain. So when we learn that knowledge and we get a license for that knowledge, it makes it stronger for us. It's not just the words we're getting, it's the condition, it's the state that we're getting also along with it, and then the spiritual support that comes from those people who wrote it to benefit others. Why did Imam al-Haddad write the book? For himself? He wrote it to benefit people. So that benefit comes across through the hearts of people who took from someone, a man, a sheikh who took from a sheikh, who took from a sheikh back to Imam al-Haddad. So that benefit is realized really, as well as in the letters of the book, and the letters that are on the page, if that makes sense. So there's ijazah for ifta. When a person's a certain level, his sheikh, his teacher will say, okay, you can give fatwa now. There's for all different disciplines in the deen, to make tafsir, ijazah to give da'wah, ijazah to teach, ijazah to whatever it might be. So they're all specific to their own discipline, so to speak. Does it make sense? No.
I know that you should only take a spirituality from one particular sheikh, but you can take knowledge from multiple. Where does that boundary lie?
So the question is about where should the person take their spiritual path from one sheikh and then knowledge from all. It's beneficial for the individual because different sheikhs have different sort of spiritual disciplines, different tariqs as they're called, different ways of getting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have the different tinges to it. So, like for example, the Qadiris, who came back to Sidna Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, they're real staunch and they're tough, and it's all about breaking the nafs, breaking the nafs, breaking the nafs. Like for example, the Shadhilis, they're about shukr, being grateful to Allah. When you realize Allah, you'll forget everything else. So if you put those two together, they kind of cancel each other out, if that makes sense to you, right? Even though they don't in reality, but they kind of do. So one, for example, I always use it's like a person one day doing very, very heavy weights and the next day running 10 kilometers. They go again. Or a person exercising in the morning, then going and eating, fast food in the evening. It doesn't work. So that's the reason why a person should take one tariq for their spiritual path. And again, for the reasons that we said previously, that your sheikh needs to know you, who you are, how you think, what your level of education are, what your level of experience is, who your family is, what your background is, how you think, all these things, so that when they give you some guidance in your spiritual path, it's direct guidance for you as an individual rather than a general principle which you can get about anything from anyone, basically. So that's the reason. So that when you've got a problem, that person you're taking your spiritual guide, the sheikh is a spiritual sheikh, and there's different types of sheikh. So there's the sheikh al-ilm, who you take your knowledge from. The sheikh al-tariq, right, who's the sheikh that helps you on your spiritual path. The sheikh al-haqiqa, the one who gives you the realities. The sheikh al-fatah, the sheikh who allows you to get to the opening of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's different teachers that you have along the way. But of course, it's better to take a tariq, to take a path from that and stick to that. Stick to the awrad, the litanies of that path, because it gives you the spiritual stability and you can build on that. And then take your knowledge, depending. Some scholars say that, oh no, you can only take your knowledge from this set of scholars. It's not the best way because things are varied. Things are very, very... Like, if we, for example, were to watch the videos of the Mashaykh in Yemen and listen to what they're saying, we couldn't relate to it. They live in a different society. Their way of life is different to our way of life. So the Mashaykh, the Habib in particular, sent their students and taught their students, so we can apply the traditional knowledge in a sense that we can relate to in the world in which we live in. And so that way we can actually take that knowledge. Otherwise, it would just be like, yeah, whatever. It's over our heads. It doesn't make sense to us. Tamam? Naam.
So I'm looking into studying forensic science, or maybe studying in university once I graduate.
Inshallah.
But my dad doesn't let me because he said it will risk my knowledge or something. He also wants me to study at Yemen. So do you have any advice?
So he doesn't want you to go to university, is that what you're saying?
He doesn't want me to study like legal stuff, do a career in legal.
In the law.
In law. He just said it would risk my being or something.
Right. Okay. So look, the difficult thing is when your dad tells you something, it's hard to go against it, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Anta wa malak li abik." You, your whole person, and your money belong to your father. So it's a difficult. How old are you, mashallah? So you still got a way to go. In terms of risking your deen, you can ask him to look at, alhamdulillah, I'm a lawyer and try and do as much halal as I possibly can in my profession. Alhamdulillah, I've never taken on a case that is dhulm to anyone or that's against the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means that I don't have a lot of cases like other lawyers do. And then I don't have a draft overhead, like lawyers, the reason they got, they're wealthy is because the banks give them money according to how many files they have in their office. So they get an overdraft so that they can keep their case. Alhamdulillah, I don't do that either. So there's always a way to do halal in that sort of thing. But if your father wants you to go and study the deen, it's not a bad thing, because there's some types of knowledge that are wajib. So how to make wudu, tahara, how to pray, how to read the Qur'an, and the knowledges that we're learning here, the sciences of the heart, they're wajib. So maybe you can come to a deal with your dad where you go defer for a year, for example, after university. Or I think a great opportunity for students, particularly at university, is you get basically from November to March off, pretty much. So during that time, when do your holidays start normally? Well, you don't go to uni. You're university students. I remember when I was at uni, we finished sometime in the beginning or the middle of November, and we don't start till the end of February. It's like almost 4 months. So other than my advice to university students is get practical experience in whatever you're doing, right, if you can during the year, and then that time go overseas and learn if you can knowledge. If you can do that, come to some sort of a compromise with your father, but there's nothing better than learning the religious sciences. Now, the other thing is, my view also is that if you want to become a scholar in Australia and dedicate your life as a sheikh, so to speak, you need to have a profession. Because I know for myself that I was working with an organisation, and most of the organisations are just amateuristic, for use of a better word. They're amateurish and they're extremely unprofessional, and they really take advantage of their employees rather than helping their employees. So if you're going to be in a situation where someone else is paying your wages and they're your employer and you're relying upon them to live, then you're going to end up being compromised. That's where you'll lose your deen. And I'm talking from personal experience. But if you have your own profession, or you have your own trade, whatever it might be, and you earn your money halal, that's what the Anbiya used to do. All the Anbiya, all the prophets. They used to earn their money halal, and then the rest of the time they used to do their teaching and do their da'wah. So, you've got to weigh that up. And you've got to tell your dad that you spoke to people, you spoke to myself or whoever, and that's the advice that you got. But I think maybe to defer for 1 year and go straight after university, after high school finishes, you can almost have a year and a half, learning the basic sciences, and then come back and start university. Because like I said, I think it's very hard to make it as a sheikh in this country. You're going to end up being, if you don't have a profession or you don't have a trade, you're going to end up being compromised. Or unless your dad or family is very, very wealthy and they're going to give you not give you money, because one that's going to stop when you disagree with them or they disagree with you. They give you, like a rental property or something where you have an income that belongs to you. It's just yours. It's no one else's business. Otherwise, it becomes very hard to make a living and have a family and then be sincere in the da'wah and have integrity in your da'wah, because there's a lot of forces out there that want to influence a person negatively. Good question. All right, anything other questions? Fadl.
I've heard that many ulama or sheikhs or pious people having dreams about the Prophet Muhammad. And they claim that it can't be fake. Because shaitan can into the dreams or something and they can answer you something say. And I just have a question about that.
So, of course, the Prophet ﷺ, the question is about if people claim they saw the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, can it be fake? It can't, because the hadith says that. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ says that he can enter the dreams, but he can't emulate, he can't copy, he can't come in the appearance of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. So if someone sees the Prophet of Allah ﷺ in their dream, there's no doubt that it's him. Now, whether they saw it or not, we don't know. We don't have any, Fadl.
Just to follow up, do we do it like, what if it was something in the heart where you just know that was the Prophet ﷺ and it wasn't like, or does it have to be from his appearance, like according to hadith?
All right, so that's a good question. How do you know it's the Prophet? You'll know. Right? If it's the Prophet of Allah ﷺ,
100%.
you'll know. There's no doubt whatsoever. And then, most people are not going to see the face of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. That's like people who have got pretty high. Most of the time they'll see a shoulder or the figure, or it felt like the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, outline, right? You with me? The smell of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, something like that. Most people. Now, if you see the face of the Prophet ﷺ, ya bakhtakum, that's awesome, right? That's awesome. You just know.
Yeah, but what if it doesn't? What if it's not what it as described?
Well, that's a good question. What if he's not? Sometimes he comes to tell you something. Like one time, one of the du'at who came from overseas came here to Australia, and his mashaykh were giving him advice. And then he saw the Prophet ﷺ, no doubt it was the Prophet, but he had an Anglo face. And he asked the mashaykh, said, that's the da'wah. That's the da'wah in this country. Your job, right? So he comes, but it's the Prophet. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. There's something, right? You will be 100% sure it's the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. And that's for those who have attachment to him. Right? That's for those who have attachment to the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. No.
What about awliya Allah? So if we see in your dreams, how would you know that's him or again?
So the next question is about the righteous people, the awliya, whoever it might be. Generally it's them, particularly those types of people like Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani and these super big personalities. Generally it's them, but sometimes you see all the different types of souls that come in the dream, they're helping you, just like the shaitan does his devilish things, Allah Azza wa Jalla sends the righteous person, the righteous souls, to help you and to do righteous things. So generally it is the way they appear. Again, if they're wearing like the sunnah, they got white beards or black beards, or they're wearing turbans, those types of things generally are signs, and depending on what they tell you as well. If they're telling you something that's corrupted, then certainly it's not those people. But if they're assisting you and helping you, that's something that's good, then generally, inshallah, it would be those people. The majority of the time. Especially those, like I said, those big personalities, Abu Hassan al-Shadili, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and Ahmad al-Rifa'i, and these, big time scholars. Most of those, it's going to be that person.
If it appears like an khiyal, like you're, for example, you're making dua and you're closing your eyes and you can see them, it's not dreaming, but you're kind of awake, but your eyes are closed and you're in deep state. Is that the same as dreaming?
It's even more. It's another level above dreaming, because dreaming's it's an unconscious state, and so it's the spiritual state. But when a person's conscious and they see those things, that's even stronger. And sometimes people need these things. Sometimes people need that reassurance. They need that. That's the madid. That's the spiritual support. And sometimes it could be that a person's related to that individual. So their great-great-great-great-great-grandfather could be, they could be descended of that person without knowing, or they can have a huge love for that person. Or that soul has a huge love for that individual as well. Or it could be that it's nusra from Allah Azza wa Jal, because these things are going to happen more and more. I know we're talking about it and some people are like, oh my goodness, what is this? We goofy Sufis or something, what's going on? Okay, but these things are going to happen more and more at the end of time, because as the Prophet said, alayhi salatu, and as we're seeing, in the metadata that's being collected, and we're seeing in the way that the world works, and we're seeing in the way that our government operates, we weren't exposed to those things. Now that, like, there's this Facebook group, or this group, they're on Facebook, they make fun of the government, right? It's funny, yeah, I can't remember what they're called, but they're really funny. Yeah, I'm not sure who it is, but anyway, so what happened now the government, every time they put on a clip or whatever they call it, there's a person who's like, he's responsible from the government. He sends them letters all the time saying, "What are you doing? Like you're pretending like, are you serious? Is that what the government's doing? They're worried about people making fun of them and criticizing them. Geez, that's bad. That was never the case 20 years ago.
The Jews?
I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think that's what it might be. And people keep sending them. You know what I mean? And they're classic. They're funny, yes, except for the swear words are a bit over the top. But, so those things are increasing. And what did the Prophet say, alayhi salatu, about the Dajjal at the end of time? He's going to have full knowledge of everything. So those things, and he will only feed those people that he's happy with, that follow him. And the rest, up to the mountains, run away because you can't eat. And the food that we'll eat is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what's going to sustain us. That's what's going to sustain us, is the remembrance of Allah. That's real. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu, that's going to happen. And so, if we don't have that connection to the ghaibiyat, the unseen, the next life, we're going to say, pish posh, that's rubbish. No, I'm not going to believe in that. What a waste of... That's the people who are going to be saved. Those people who are connected to these people, those people who take those paths to these people, because their path is back to the Prophet of Allah, ﷺ. That's the meaning of the hadith. If you have an issue, go back to the Qur'an and the Prophet of Allah. Because the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ is wiratha. What does wiratha mean? It's inherited. What's inherited mean? Means I can't inherit from my grandfather if my father's alive, because there's a person between us. So the inheritance is shaykh upon student upon shaykh upon student, straight after each other, one after each other, one after each other, one after each other, one after each other, without a break. You can't live 1400 years after the Prophet ﷺ and read a book and say, yeah, that's what the Prophet meant. That's not ilm. That's not knowledge. It's information. It's not knowledge. Knowledge came from someone who was taught by someone who was taught by someone, back to the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, just like the chain of ahadith. Okay? Fadl. If you have to go, please leave, because it's getting later than we thought it would go.
Can you explain what the Sufi believes, especially specifically the Yemeni Sufi beliefs?
Yeah, I can, but it'll take a very, very long time. It's just about what we're reading in the Book of Assistance, right? How to cleanse one's soul and stay away from the sifat al-madhmuma, from the qualities that Allah doesn't like, the blameworthy qualities, and how to implement in one's life the praiseworthy qualities, the prophetic qualities. So to be less devilish and more prophetic, if you like. Or satanic and less satanic and more prophetic, if you like. That's the essence of it. It's just called Sufi because, like fiqh. Was it called fiqh in the time? It wasn't in the time of the Prophet. They just, later on, the name just stuck like that. Or Mustalah al-Hadith. Who said upon who, al-An'ana as they call it. This person said that, this person said that, this person said. That wasn't called Mustalah al-Hadith. Or Usul al-Fiqh. These are different types of disciplines that they just gave him those names. And Tasawwuf is a name given to the spiritual sciences, and it's fard. It's fard, not fard to be a Sufi, but it's fard to learn the spiritual sciences, jealousy, and like we did, what it is and what its signs are, and how does one know it has it, and how does one rid oneself of that blameworthy qualities, because they lead to being satanic rather than prophetic. Tamam? No.
So if someone asks you, are you a Sufi?
I'd love to be a Sufi if we were a Sufi, but... So what do you believe are Sufis? I mean, it's a loaded question because there's a group of Muslims out there that are saying that Sufis are dal, that they're lost and they're not following the proper deen, they're not even real Muslims. So if they're going to put you in that category, you don't want to say that. But I don't think anyone who's ever was a Sufi actually said they were a Sufi, because if you say that, that means you say you've made it. And none of us have made it yet. Inshallah, when we die on our deathbeds, in the last breath we take, Allah will give us husn al-khatimah, a perfect ending. And then that's when we're successful, so we don't know. One of the sheikhs, the students were praising, MashaAllah, you're a qari and you're a hafiz. He said, how do you know I'm a hafiz? They said, do we know you've memorized the Qur'an? He said, you only know I'm a hafiz when I hit the grave. If I hit the grave and Allah says I'm a hafiz, I'm a hafiz. Otherwise, I can't guarantee anything on this world. Who knows how one's going to die? Subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing is, I know it feels like it's warm during the day, but it's cold at night. And we feel like it's almost summer, but we need to make sure we sleep early as possible after Isha, until the summer really hits. And even when the hours change in a couple of weeks, this time is the time when it's easy to get sick. It's because it's hot during the day, then it's a couple of hot days, and it's 30 degrees, and it's 17 degrees, and then there's a southerly blowing, then there's a northerly blowing, and it messes up one's system. And make sure you keep fasting as well, because there's only a few more days and then it's going to go back to, inshallah, it's going to be the daylight savings, and it's hard to fast till 8 o'clock and all these types of things. So make sure you keep on that path, inshallah, keep with your litanies. Don't stay up till 12 o'clock. Don't stay up till 1 o'clock, because you're not going to be able to recover because it's still cold. Yesterday it was 3 degrees in the morning. Freezing, that's winter. So look after yourself, inshallah, on these days, so that you don't get sick, so that you can keep worshipping Allah Azza wa Jalla, and you can keep doing what you need to do. Don't be fooled by the hot days, and don't be fooled by the cool nights. Any other questions? Alhamdulillah, rabbil alamin, salatu wa salam ala khayril anam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Ya rahman rahim.